Okay, well, we'll start by asking you to state your name.
My name is Marilyn Wetholm. I'm mom of Nicole Parisian, who was murdered August 27th, 2007 by Andrew Evans. And he's out now. He got paroled after 5 years.
Wow.
And he's in Calgary walking the streets. But the thing with that is just unbelievable because he had no time, no coaching in prison. It was just by the AARC where he came from in the first place, and who I believe is the fault that my
Right.
daughter had
So
today.
was he a graduate of AARC that she was dating, or was she
He was a
in?
graduate.
Okay, was he enrolled in the or was she enrolled in the facility at any time?
No, she was not.
Okay.
Dean Voss, the president of ARC, I think he is the man, whatever, he's the head man.
Right.
He told everyone that he had at the hearing, at the parole hearing, that he had washed his hands of Andrew Evans, and that because he was doing drugs and alcohol, and he didn't want him anymore in his facility. So basically, he said he kicked him out and washed his hands of him. And then shortly after that, that's when he murdered my daughter. And the funny thing about all of this is that when we were at the parole hearing, Dean Voss stated that he Andrew had phoned him and said that he had just murdered someone and he was going to commit suicide or kill himself. So Dean Voss told him to come back to Calgary and then they would work things out. So there was no drug testing, no alcohol testing, nothing. And he just left, and he had dropped my daughter off in the bushes. Who knows? Someone could have saved her life if he would have phoned an ambulance or the police. Somebody could have got there sooner.
Right.
There was an RCMP officer who was trying to give her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when he got there, but it was too late. Thank God somebody was there to hold her.
Yeah. Did Dean Voss, so he knew, he got this call, but he did nothing. He got a call from Andrew and he did nothing.
No, he did nothing. And then when he coached him all the 5 years that he was in, every Sunday when he was in prison, Andrew would talk to Dean Voss for an hour. And that was his coaching. That was his controlling. And that man is a control freak. So you've got a wild animal that you're trying to control. And I don't know what he done the first time they ended up in ARC, but it was, his records are buried, and we don't know what his assault or what it was that he had done. You know, after, and then he's murdered my daughter.
Right. And
it's all, I mean, the parole board even informed me that he was going to Red Deer, Alberta for 4 days, and ruined my Christmas. That what Christmas that I did have, or was going to have, was all demolished because of the fact that he was on his way to see his family. And I have no family to come. I can't afford to go over to Vancouver and see my grandchildren and my daughter. Hell, he's just made it unbearable for me to even, think about who he's going to murder next.
Right. It's terrible. Did he, was he a counselor or was he
was a counselor,
like a patient?
Yes. Yeah,
he was a counselor.
Yeah.
Okay. And did he have any credentials, do you know?
I don't think any of them there have credentials.
Okay.
Just, they call Dean Voss Dr. Dean Voss. He has no credits for being a doctor. He has no psychology. He's not a psychologist. He's not any kind of person except a control freak.
Right. Did you meet Andrew before this happened? Had you known him at all?
No. The first time I ever saw him was in the courtroom, where I had my picture of my daughter, and I went up to the prosecution and I said, "Why are you defending this animal?" And they, wouldn't allow me in there with my picture of my daughter. Wouldn't allow me inside because they figured I would be a hostile witness, which was, a joke.
Yeah, well, who wouldn't be a hostile witness if somebody murdered their child?
Yeah, that's exactly what, so I had to stay outside and keep my opinion to myself, even though This guy, in the prosecution in the beginning said he was a very good boy. Can you imagine that? Because he came from a background of a wealthy family. Very, very, he had everything. He had it all. Privileged kid all his life, had it all. And now he has it all again, because they're still privileged. And this murder, and I don't understand how a mother would even want a son in her house, or her household, or even around them, knowing what he's done, knowing that he's took another person's life. And he's murdered someone. How can you trust anybody after they murdered someone and lie about being sober or drunk?
Right.
She was just a little girl. She was 122 pounds. She was no match for him. And he started beating her, strangling her, and until he took the life from her. And he rolled her up on the carpet and dragged her down the stairs. And said, that's just stuff. It's just stuff he took out. It was my daughter that he took out in that carpet and dragged into the bushes. And he had a car because he had thrown some of her stuff out onto the road, where she was. I don't know how Darcy gave me that. It's been such a blur, but all I know is that justice is not being served, and it never has been. What are we to do as victims when these guys get out and they're walking around and our little girls are all dead? They're gone forever.
Was Dean Vaughn prosecuted at all? Dean Voss, excuse me, prosecuted at all?
No, he was not prosecuted but we are. I want to have him charged with accessory to after the fact.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like what you were describing. It seems he really at least had negligent actions, if not willful actions that were criminal in nature by not reporting it immediately.
Yeah. Well, I know that she could have been alive. He could have saved her, but he told him to get back there right now.
Oh, he told Andrew to return to the program and to just leave her.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So that to me is like criminal. He knew all about it. He knew that he murdered someone. He murdered her. He didn't know for sure if he was dead or not. And she said, "I might have murdered someone."
Wow.
And Dean Voss says, "Just get back here to Calgary. We'll get you some help." And they could have phoned the ambulance. He could have sent Andrew, phone the ambulance, phone the police, and get some help there, and then run. But he didn't do either. He just ran.
Right.
I know, like when the officer was trying to give her mouth resuscitation, so because she was still warm, but nothing was done.
Just seconds. Even him calling may have made that difference.
That's right. That's right. Him calling, and Dean Voss knew about it, and she was lying in the bushes there. So he knew where she was. And he didn't inform no one. He just wanted that animal back in his possession.
But did she end up getting found? How did she get recovered?
No, she never did get recovered. She died.
No, I know she died, but how did her body get recovered or discovered?
The police were coming there because they heard all the commotion and stuff in the room because she was screaming for help and no one came out.
Oh, wow.
No one came for help. There was a video in the room. It showed him attacking her and beating her up and doing stuff, but it was shadows. But it was all on tape. And he should have got first-degree murder, not second-degree murder.
Right.
So and he savagely beat and murdered her. She was tiny, screaming. Her face was full of tears and anguish. And I couldn't lift her head up. I just don't have any more words for that, except, I want him back in prison where he belongs, because he's a psycho.
Right.
He's as cold as a fire, as cold as a wall. You know, he won't.
I can't believe 5 years you can get out on murder in Canada. I mean, what's the drug sentencing? I know this, you might not know this, but do you know what the difference is? Like, if Andrew had been caught with,
if he'd been caught with drugs,
yeah,
he would have served a lot more time than he would have had murdering someone. But that's a fact, because he had been dealing, and the majority of people that deal in drugs are the ones that go to jail because it's the money that's involved. But you take a woman's life here, it's not worth it. It's not worth 2 cents. We're disposable, just disposable. Oh yeah, when they say that getting paroled in 10 years, that's 7 years. Now, then his parole for 3 more years. Now he'll be going every 6 months. I have to listen and they have a meeting to see how well he's doing. They want me to write a letter of how I feel, and well, they're not gonna let me read and write everything how I feel anymore because nothing's changed.
wow.
Nothing's changed. He's out, and I can't, until he does something, until he breaks the law again, I can't do nothing.
Can you file a civil suit against him or his family for this?
I'm gonna try, and a wrongful death suit with Dean Voss, because he's, as far as I'm concerned, he's the fault. My daughter's being dead now because she could have been alive.
Right.
Wouldn't have told
But was he was living at the program, he left the program and then returned back to the program in Alberta or in Calgary. So
he was kicked out of the program. He went to prison after he murdered my daughter. I don't know if he's back in the program now, but he is.
No, before when the murder occurred, was he still like actively with AARC?
We don't know. We don't.
Oh, okay.
He was out. He was in Vancouver. We don't know what he was doing out here. He might have been on the payroll. We don't have a clue, because we don't know how he, what he was doing. He was going. He's supposed to be a university student, supposed to be a coach for a rugby team, and this guy is no more coach than I am. Hey, pardon me. He's a counselor at university, and a counselor of adolescents, which is bad. Because if you put your kid in there, I'm telling you, you might as well drop them off and forget that you even own them, because you'll never see them again after 4 years, after 18 years old, and then they can't charge you anymore. They can't charge what they have done to you. They belittled you, they beat you down. You're made to be nothing. And it doesn't matter. You bow down to them, and then they start making you into what they think you should be.
Right.
And that's all controlled.
Yeah.
Well, Dean Voss lied to the Fifth Estate, saying he did not know of any sexual crimes. My daughter, as far as I'm concerned, was raped by Andrew Evans. He's trying to say that she was a prostitute. If that clears his conscience or it makes him feel better, that's the only excuse he's got for murdering her.
Right.
That's a poor excuse for murdering a woman, as far as I'm concerned. You can't.
There's just no excuse.
There's no excuse. You're married. You have a partner. You have a boyfriend. You have a partner. And you have a one-night stand once in a while when you're foolish and young. I'm sorry to say, but it does happen.
Right.
And he was just a nice-looking man. And she, thought that and her father had just passed away. She had a whole inheritance to get to, but she didn't want to come over to the island right away to get that inheritance because it was still fresh there. Her father had dropped dead of a heart attack.
Wow.
So, and I guess she was looking for comfort. And Dean was, Andrew Evans was the one that was going to give her that comfort. Instead, he murdered her. And I won't stop this fight till the day I die. Me and Helena are going to be on them forever. He won't be able to shut the door, and he won't be able to not hear about her anymore. This is going to be out every time and the chance I get. I'll be in Calgary protesting, and you can bet your life on that.
Wonderful. Well, that's great that you're passionate and you're going after them. This whole situation is not wonderful, so I'm reluctant to say, good, go get them,
Yeah.
because it's such a tragic situation. But I am, we support you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Nicole's looking down and she's saying thank you too, because women, all these women need a voice. And our moms and our grandparents and every woman, sister, and brother out there that lost someone. I'm very, very sorry, because I know how you feel.
Right.
It's a loss that you can't explain. You're empty, totally empty forever. They close, they taken something from you, and then they've left that door, and I keep thinking that she's gonna come back.
Right.
But she's never coming back. She's on my mantle, sitting at home. I'm gonna give her a celebration of life, like get something going and get her to Las Vegas, and take her all the way through that town, and put her on the roller coaster. Me and her, the one that goes up and down,
Oh wow, that one's scary.
I know. I always wanted to go out. We used to go to Disneyland together and go on the rides, so that'd be the last hurrah with me and her together. And then I'll let her go. I have to let her go. I can't keep her anymore.
Right.
And why does Dean Voss, why does he want this animal to survive? I have no idea.
Oh, so they can say he's part of their, 100% success rate.
Oh, well, they're 100%. I'm going to tell you about the success rate.
Yeah.
When I was doing that petition in Calgary on September 27th, there was a young woman, and there was a young man, and a pregnant lady, a young girl in the front seat of the car. Helena had walked up and said hi, because they were from AARC, and they said to her, well, she deserved it, meaning Nicole.
Wow.
And Helena said,
that's sick.
What did you say? And she come over and told me. And the riot squad sitting right across the street. I looked at her. I said, "What did you say?" She says, "She deserved it. She was drugs and alcohol." I said, "Excuse me. You're gonna tell me you're I don't know if this is your daughter, or if it's a friend, or who this young man is in the back seat. But if he went out down the street tomorrow and mutilated and cut that baby out of her stomach and cut her throat and brutally murdered her, you would say that was okay? You're telling me it's okay to murder someone? I said, get the hell out of here."
Wow. Did they have a response to that?
No. The woman's face just went white, and the boy just looked like unbelievable.
Wow.
That's when Dean Voss has been teaching me them that was Nicole's fault. He's telling them all that what Andrew done is what happens when you drink and do alcohol. And he wasn't doing any of it. There's no proof of alcohol or drugs whatsoever.
Wow, that sounds like Dean Voss is really trying to instill the idea of personal responsibility for one's actions.
That's exactly what he's doing. That's exactly what he's doing. And there has been cover-ups inside there. Watch the Fifth Estate.
Right.
People don't go talking about this stuff if it's not true. They're not going to put themselves out there and say it's not true. I'm not going to come on this show and say Andrew Evans murdered my daughter when it's not true. I'm not going to come and say Dean Voss covered it up for Andrew Evans when it's true.
Yeah.
All of it's the truth. There's nothing that and if he wants to come after me personally, he'd look awfully sick doing it, because I haven't got a beat except my old age pension.
Well, I hope you can go after him, because I think he should lose his old age pension.
I think he should be locked up with Andrew.
Yeah.
I think they both should be in the same prison together, and then they coach each other. Well, we have proof that he was predatory toward girls, that Andrew Evans was, when he was in AARC. There were girls raped and put in closets, but they couldn't see them. These are the accusations that these women have made, and that's on They don't know if it was Andrew Evans, though. We don't know who's been doing all the stuff, but they shipped him out right after this all happened.
It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre what goes on in these facilities, and it's very unfortunate when you have people who are sociopaths like Dean Voss.
Oh, he is a sociopath. He is. He kept staring at me and smiling at me like, oh, you know, right in pro hearing, he was told not to turn around. He turned around. I had Nicole's ashes with me. You know, if I wouldn't have had Nicole's ashes and I would have had just a box, I would have thrown it at him.
Wow.
You know, I couldn't throw Nicole at him. You know.
How inappropriate.
Oh, yeah, they all wanted to see what I looked like. So, I hope they had good luck. Because he seen me in the parking lot, and they were all laughing. And laughing, because they had got Andrew out. Oh, we did it. Well, she can't.
That's so sick.
Yeah, well, she can't do nothing. They're looking at me saying, you know, I'm crying my eyes out. You know, what the hell happened here? They let this murderer out, and everybody's walking away having a good old day. Celebrating. And I'm walking away with my daughter in my hands saying, I'm sorry, Nicole, I couldn't get him.
Wow.
Yeah. But that was a nervous smile, Mr. Voss. It was a very nervous smile. I mean, he's
good.
Yeah, he's scared. He's hiding things, and everything's going to come out because people are, like loose ships. Their tongues are like loose ships. Eventually, they have to talk.
Right.
So someone out there knows something, and they're going to start yapping. They can contact me anytime they want. You know, I can give you my email address, and you put that out there, and they can contact me.
That's terrible. How old was Nicole?
She was 32.
Wow.
And then when he murdered her, she wasn't even past 32. She was August 7th, she turned 32. And when he murdered her, she was 33. Like 3 weeks later, she was 33. She wasn't 32, 33 yet. Still my baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a good kid. She really was. She loved everyone. She was nice to everyone. She helped old people, loved old people. Animals. She'd bring anything home. Pigs, potbelly pigs. Oh my God. Got lost at the store trying to catch a potbelly pig. Can you imagine that? Squealing all over.
Oh my goodness. Oh no.
Yeah. She was a top manicurist in Las Vegas. You know, she was a manicurist in Canada here. That's why I want to take it back to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
She had friends there. I had friends there too.
Are you going to have a memorial for her down there?
Yes. Yeah. Celebration of life. And this one is not going to be like the one that she had we had to have.
Right.
It wasn't even. It was just rushed. It wasn't even planned. I mean, what can you do? Can't do nothing. Just ruin.
Was there anything else? I mean, do you know if that's where Andrew is now? Is he back with Dean Voss and all them?
He's under Dean Voss's control. We know that because he's liable for him. Part of the conditions of Andrew being released was Dean Voss. He is involved somehow. Yes.
Wow.
But whether he's working in that facility, I have no clue. But he shouldn't be around any kids or women.
Definitely. Not. Really disturbing.
Yeah, he's not allowed to let around any women, so he's supposed to, if he has contact with them, they're supposed to tell the girl that he has a girlfriend or something, but who's going to want to date him?
Right. Well, if you're in captivity, I don't know. That's a predator's playground, those captive settings like AARC.
Oh, yeah. It is. and people got aware, because you know what he wants to do next? He wants to go after the United. He wants to go after the United. Which is it? The nation, Aboriginal. He made an application for yep, go up to northern BC to Aboriginal areas and get these kids out of there. Now, imagine what will happen to them if they grant him a license to go there.
Wow.
You know, these kids, he figures anybody's family, they're poor, or, because they get sponsors, so each kid's worth $50,000 a year. It's just pocket money for him.
Right.
And government funding, and these women, parents that, because their kids, they'll screw you when they're a teenager, hey, they'll get out of that. Do not put them in a place where they're going to be driven nuts.
Right.
You know, driven to the fact that they hate you and end up coming wanting to kill you because you put them in there. There was a guy that came out and murdered his mom and dad with an axe.
Wow.
You know, so it's happened. And there's the guys that, you know, it's just, I don't know how many kids have killed their parents there. Look on Star Park and you'll see, and a list of names of what has happened. You know,
Okay.
you have to go there and look on that site, and you have to look at the Fifth Estate on the video there and hear what those girls have to say. That is proof of Dean Voss's actions and things that he's done. And the only place that anybody's, you know, they don't know how many lives this guy is ruining in there. Like, these kids, think about it, they're kids. They don't know nothing. They you know, some are rich, and well, they get treated the best. But the poorer ones, they're made to, you know, lick poop off the floor if they have to. That's how bad it gets in there.
Right.
You know, one woman was gone to the bathroom, and she was brushing her teeth. She came out of the bathroom. She put her hand down between her legs and wiped the feces over this. She stuffed her hand in this girl's mouth.
Ugh.
And that's on the Fifth Estate too. That, you know, and they couldn't do anything. If they reacted to it, they were punished for it. So whatever that meant, beatings or whatever they did. There are those that don't get them, but there are those that do. So whatever ones they choose not to, the abuse, the weaker ones, maybe won't get as much, but the hot-headed ones are the ones. Like a person like me would really get it.
Yeah, me too.
No, there's no control. Like he's small. These are minds that haven't even matured yet. They haven't even grown yet. They're in adolescence. They're not even capable of thinking what a grown-up thinks like. And they put this insane stuff into their heads, and they become criminals. And some of them are masterminds at it. Some of them are so good at it, you know, but they can fool the public.
Right.
Andrew Evans fooled everyone. He's out. You know, and I'm just sick of it. Sick of the justice system here. It makes anybody's skin crawl. Especially if you're a woman, you will not get justice. That guy will be out 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and nothing. There's no life. There's never a life for anyone. Where before, in the old days, they used to take you out and hang you.
Right.
Or shoot you. One of the two. And our criminal justice system should be life for life. The world needs to be woken up. There's no compassion anymore. You get immune to what happens to people. It's just like the shock phase is gone now. It's not like, oh well, just another one. Just like today, some kid got murdered on the SkyTrain because he was defending someone. He got brutally stabbed to death. You know, So I feel sorry for that family. And all he was just doing protecting someone.
Wow.
And that happened this afternoon. In the streets of Vancouver at the SkyTrain. And he'll walk. The guy that murdered him. No, but the thing that I want to stress the most is that when Andrew phoned Dean Voss, my daughter he just threw her out into the bushes, and she was still alive. He could have saved her. All he could have said, Dean Voss could have said, phone an ambulance, so that you can get help for there to make sure that that girl, is either alive or dead, but have some help there. And Dean Voss told him not to. Dean Voss told him to run, come back, and leave the scene. Now, isn't that aiding and abetting?
I would think so. That's my understanding of it. I believe he should be prosecuted if it was in the U.S., I believe it would be in that situation for the same crime, that it would be the same charge. If it was in the U.S., that's my understanding.
Yeah,
but
it's not
in
like
Canada,
this.
I'm not sure.
But we'll see what we can do. People will read this and see this, and maybe somebody will know something too about Andrew and about what he did in the past, if he was a murderer before, or what.
Right.
All I know is that that AARC is not it's not a place to take a human being. You're taking your kid, you're gonna come back with a wild animal, somebody that will hate you, control you. Can't, they think they're bad before you put them in there. It's gonna be a lot worse when they come out.
Right.
And everybody's brainwashed. Everybody's made to think. When a young person comes up, that woman's mother, and said, my daughter, and I feel sorry for how they all thinking there.
Right.
Because that's what he's taught them. That it was the other person's fault and not Andrew's fault.
That's so sick.
So you can't have blame. Well, there is blame. There's lots of blame to go around. The fact that they hid everything, the fact that they, did all this, and this has all just come out in the last little while. Otherwise, before that. I sure appreciate what you're doing, to help these people, these young girls and mums like me, to get our stories out, because, there is that criminal element that I talked about, that Andrew, murdered my daughter, left her for dead, and Dean Voss told him to come back when he could have told him to phone an ambulance and phone the police and get somebody get there some help, because she might not be dead today. And that, he left her in a pile of bushes, and that's where she was found. And the police, they tried to do it, resuscitation on her, and there was no luck. So, all I just gotta say is be safe out there, ladies. Watch for your company, stay in groups, and don't trust a shy man.
Yeah.
Because those are the type, they'll do you in.
That's so creepy. It's so creepy that they're telling the kids at AARC, that a murder victim is at fault for her own murder. That is so obscene.
There's proof of that, really, because there were people in the room when Dean Voss told everyone that Andrew had murdered someone, and that was all that was said, and that's what you get for you do drugs and alcohol. And now AARC's the only one that can save him again, when AARC was the one that put him out there.
Yeah.
So there's a two-headed lie in there. Which one do you believe? You kicked him out, and he brings it back after he murders someone. Oh, I'm going to look after this boy now. You know, he needs saving. He needs to be in jail. And he needs to be watched 24/7.
Nicole needed saving. Dean Voss did not do it.
Yes.
So.
Nicole she was a bright-eyed, beautiful girl. She had a future. She could have been a grandma. I could have been a grandma by now. That's it's going on 8 years now. This August it will be 8 years, and I still don't have my daughter. My other daughter, she went through a bad trip, a bad time, lost her kids over this. Blamed herself. Said it was her fault because she kicked Nicole out that night because they were arguing about their fathers and about the inheritance. That was stupid. So Nicole decided to go downtown. And that's where she met the devil himself. They say, wasn't good timing.
No.
But he got caught. He didn't get away with it. Dean Voss is part of it. AARC is part of it. And if you want to believe that your children are safe in AARC with Dean Voss, forget it.
Right. Or any of these straight
treatment
spin-off
centers,
programs.
any of these places that are next to being a brainwashing facility. Whatever method they have to use to control you. It doesn't matter whether it's a belt, whether it's a cord whipping you, or whether it's cutting your hair off, whether it's dragging you around in the nude, or whatever. Whatever you think that disgusting thing that they do, they've done.
Right. Inspecting girls for virginity.
Yes, another thing. Make sure that you are, or you leave, you might not be, because, and even if you said anything, like I said, they cover their butts. You go in there when you're under 14, 13, I don't know what the age limit on that is, and you're released after 18, well, you can't go back and charge them anymore, because you're an adult now. So anything that they've done to you in those 4 years that you've been in that facility and driven you nuts, and your life is all so ruined because you don't know what way to turn. You don't even know what reality is anymore. You can't imagine what your life is. You don't know where to start. You have no idea. You haven't been, with the human, normal people. You've been with these people that all try and tell you, this is what you do, and this is how you do it, and this is when you do it.
Right.
And if you don't do it, prepare for what you're going to get. And that is Dean Voss. That is AARC.
Please state your name.
Tammy Brown.
Okay, and do you affirm that what you're saying in this interview is true and that HEAL has permission to use this interview or recording of the interview? Okay.
Yes.
So what program was your child in?
We were involved in the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center in Calgary, Alberta.
What was your experience with that program?
Well, our experience wasn't a good one. We went to the AARC program seeking help. We were in crisis. My son had involvement with the law, and he was seeking counseling, mental health treatment. He didn't want to go on committing crime. He was stealing cars. He didn't want to continue doing that into adulthood and wanted to get help with his problems so that he wouldn't end up in an adult jail. So we went to AARC looking for mental health treatment and family counseling, which the AARC program said that they would offer us. And when we went into the AARC program, we realized fairly quickly that that's not what we were going to get. and they deemed my son an addict pretty much from the start. And I tried to take him out of the program after several weeks, and I was unable to do that. So he ended up staying in the AARC program from start to finish without his family with him.
Wow. So did they bar your contact after they decided that you didn't want to support the program?
They did. They barred our contract when they found out that I wouldn't support the program, but they also barred our contract prior to that, which was one of the things that I found disturbing about the program. Is as soon as they had my son on their property, my uncensored contact with him ended. I wasn't able to have any conversation with him that wasn't monitored by AARC staff or a counselor, a peer counselor, junior peer counselor, or someone at AARC.
So was he court ordered into the program, your son, or what was the circumstances that prevented you from removing him?
What happened is that when my son had a court appearance, we brought it to the judge that we were going to try the AARC program. It wasn't something that he was sentenced to go to. He wasn't being held on remand there or anything. It was just it was added as a condition of his release that he attend the AARC program because we brought it to the court. Me and my son brought that to his court date, stating that we're going to try the AARC program because we really did not know what we were getting into.
Right.
We were very deceived as to what they were offering, and we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know that the youth court judge that he has very strong ties to the AARC program. The judge was Judge Cook Stanhope, and her husband, Dr. Alan Stanhope, was on the AARC's board of directors.
Wow.
And he is the doctor that the youth are brought to in AARC. They're not allowed to see their own doctors or dentists or professionals. They're brought to Dr. Alan Stanhope. And I discovered that because the AARC program sent a prescription for my son to get some acne medication, and the prescribing doctor was Dr. Alan Stanhope. And I called his office to find out if he was any relation to Judge Cook Stanhope, and they're married.
Wow.
Yes. So I did try. I went to his next court appearance. I tried to get him removed. Well, I told the judge that I was withdrawing consent to have him in the AARC program, and I wish to remove him from AARC. That we wish to have no further involvement with AARC. And I also I tried to have conversation with my son that day. His lawyer that he had at the time through the Youth Criminal Defense Office told me that he could arrange for me to have private conversation with my son that day because I was worried. I hadn't been able to talk to him about any of this, and the judge disallowed it. My son arrived late with the AARC staff to court for one thing, and then when we did take a break, the judge disallowed me to have conversation with my son.
Wow. And
her reasoning, I asked her about this, her reasoning for that was that none of the other parents in AARC can have private conversation with their kids, so why should I be able to?
Wow.
Yes, it was something. So he went back to the AARC program and I did not. And also at that point, my younger son, my son's sibling, he has autism, and he had been attending AARC as a sibling up until that point, and he was suffering because of it. He was suffering at school, and he was suffering at home, and it was having a very negative effect on him and our home life.
Yeah.
And I wasn't willing to bring him there anymore. And I did talk to the AARC staff about that, and they said that if he wasn't in the AARC program, that he could not live in my house.
Oh my God!
So I would have to. I told them that I have nowhere for my youngest son to go. He's not any kind of a druggie or an alcoholic. He's in a special needs class. He takes a bus to school that picks him up from home and drops him off at home. He doesn't have any friends that he hangs around with that are going to pose any kind of a risk, and that the AARC program is proving to be detrimental for him, and I'm not willing to bring him in anymore. And they said if I couldn't find any family to bring him to, that I was going to have to just kick him out into the streets.
Wow.
They said that they actually said that he has a better chance out there than my son that's in the program.
Wow.
Yes, and they also did try to get my youngest son, who has autism and isn't a druggie or an alcoholic or anything like that. They tried to get him to sign himself into the program as well.
Wow.
Yeah, when I went to meetings and he was supposed to be in the sibling group, he was being privately counseled by one of the counselors at AARC, and I had no awareness of this. I found out about that when one of the counselors brought me his workbook and asked me to help him with it because he didn't seem to be able to read it.
Oh, wow.
So he couldn't read the content in the book. He couldn't read it, let alone try to understand it. And that's when I found out that he was being counseled. And my youngest son told me that they tried to get him to sign papers at the program.
Do you know if they require the kids to replace themselves if they're going to leave the program or graduating? I know that in the straight spin-off programs and in the straight, they did have to do some, public speaking or try to, like, recruitment type things. Well,
come the end, even though I didn't have contact with my son throughout his time at the AARC program, but I did attend his court dates. And at the end, when he was actually being sentenced, was very close to when he was graduating. It kind of coincided with his graduation from AARC. And I do remember when in the court, his lawyer told the judge, the judge asked him what he was planning on doing when he finished at the AARC program, and the judge said that he would be going on to work at the program to give back.
Oh, wow.
And that he was going to, as far as I know, the plan was for him to go down and study in the U.S. and come back and work as staff at the AARC program. But that isn't what he ended up doing. I'd also like to add that this lawyer who said that was a new lawyer. That date when I tried to make arrangements, the date I was speaking to prior was the youth criminal defense lawyer, and when he tried to coordinate a meeting with me, with my son, the AARC program made him fire that lawyer, and they provided him with their own AARC-friendly lawyer.
Wow.
And that lawyer, Mark Tyndale, is now a youth court judge.
Oh,
a drug
my God.
court. Sorry, not youth court, drug court judge.
That is very scary. So it's very common. Like
his lawyer was out of it. His own lawyer that was acting for him was now out of the picture, and my son was now at AARC without a lawyer, without his family. He was on his own.
Wow.
So, and I did try to talk to the AARC program, and they wouldn't have anything to do with me because I was not able to comply with what they wanted. And one thing would be kicking my youngest handicapped son out of the home. But I did spend a lot of time around the building trying to at least see my son, because he was actually released from his release papers from court.
Yeah.
Was released to my custody. He was released to my custody with the condition that he attend AARC.
Wow.
However, I never saw him, and I wasn't able to speak to him.
That's really
but I did
scary.
go around the AARC program. Yeah, it was. I went around the AARC program to try to at least see him, and many days I wasn't able to see him. Like they would see me in my car, and they would keep him from going into the building, and I just never saw him go in or out of the building. It was very scary because I didn't even know if he was alive. So, and I didn't see him we entered the AARC program in August, and then he graduated in July of the next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they give him a new name or address him by name that he was not?
They did. They gave him a variation of his own name, and he was so confused when he finally graduated from AARC, he couldn't remember what his own middle name was.
That is terrible.
Yes, and so many things that he couldn't remember if things happened to him or happened to his brother. He wasn't sure if his middle name was his own or his brother's. That's how much of a psychological effect it had on him.
Wow. When did this all go on?
It was from August of 2007 until July of 2008, so a year. And I didn't see my son, I didn't talk to him. I didn't talk to him uncensored I mean, we had what they call talks, and which is where you sit in a group and your child can talk about some instance from the past where they were using drugs or alcohol, and then their old comer will say that they relate and they give some instance of their drug or alcohol use that's similar, and then everyone hugs, but I don't consider that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
They use a lot of the same lingo as straight to this newcomer, newbie stuff, old comers.
Oh, they absolutely do. They even have Zero Club. They use a moral inventory. Yeah, they have host homes, host recovery homes. It's all the same. It's all the same. I think the only thing that I'm aware of that's different is that they don't do motivating in AARC.
Okay.
But it's still just as hard. I mean, if you're sitting in the chair, you have to put your hand out, like as if you were crossing the street. You know how you put your arm out like that?
Yeah.
You hold your arm out like that until you're called on, and then if you're called on, you go stand up and you speak to the group, and then you stand there. So I remember one night I was called on, and I didn't realize that I now had to stand there in the same spot for the rest of the night.
Wow.
I couldn't sit down after I was done speaking. Once you speak, you're standing there. And I thought, I'm never doing this again because it wasn't very comfortable standing there for eternity up against the wall. So, yeah, so they don't have the motivating, but everything else seems to be the same. Zero Club, moral inventories, the phases. You get set back for doing things that are completely unrelated to drug or alcohol use. And
so there's a level system.
Yeah, there sure is, yeah.
And I think we already covered that, but he was denied contact with you and unmonitored contact with you and visits with you and your family?
Yes, and when Christmas came around, I tried to bring in some presents for my son, which I have the guidelines, so I know what kind of things they were allowed to have and not allowed to have. So I brought him a shirt, which I wrapped up, and I brought him some stocking stuffers in a stocking, and the clinical, the clinical director? I think he was, Colin Brown. He was a higher end staff. He unwrapped the present, and he gave the shirt to my son and told him it was one of his.
Wow.
It was like a hand-me-down shirt. So my son got the shirt, but he wasn't able to know that it came from his family.
Wow.
And the stocking stuffers were presented to him as a donation to the center.
Wow.
So I did go in and speak to Dean Voss about seeing my son at Christmas, and he disallowed it. And I did continually go around the center. I would pull in front of the center, try to see in the windows, like from my car, and, just try to see what my son's up to, what's going on, is he okay? And one of the counselors came out one day and told me that Dean Voss, the director of AARC, was my son's legal guardian, and told me to go away and just not have anything more to do with hanging around there, and just to leave. So I was upset about that, and I went down and checked into it. I got some legal advice, and they told me that absolutely not. It couldn't just happen like that. There would have to be an application made at the courthouse, and there would have to be a court appearance, and I would have to be, privy to the goings on of him becoming my son's legal guardian. It's something I could definitely contest in court, and I went down and I checked at the courthouse, and there was no application for guardianship over my son, who was 17 at the time when he was in AARC.
So this was just an intimidation tactic to keep him there?
Yes, and I was very upset because that year, we'd gone through a lot that year. We were in crisis. We were seeking help, and that was the last year that my son was going to be a minor, and the next Christmas after that he'd be 18 and a legal adult, so that was the last year that I had my child as a child, and I couldn't see him, on his birthday when he turned 18, and just missed out on a lot of things, and he missed out on a lot of things. He missed out on a lot. He was in the Young Offender Center for 3 months prior to going to AARC, so he definitely didn't have any drug or alcohol problem going on at that time.
Right.
When he was admitted into the Young Offender Center or being held there on remand, he was assessed by the nursing staff, and they they did their assessments, they checked him out, and deemed him not to have a drug or alcohol problem. If anyone would be familiar with youth with an addiction, it would be them. They would recognize it. They would recognize it, and it would have been noted, and it would have been dealt with, and he wasn't. They said that he didn't have any addictions that were apparent to them at all, and he was there for the next 3 months. So you think if he did have a serious problem, if he was the worst of the worst, they would have seen it.
Right.
Right. And they didn't. But that's how he was treated in the AARC program.
So beyond them wanting to make him staff, was he forced to do any other labor? And was he compensated for that? Like, was he put in charge of other kids?
Yes, he was put in charge of other kids. Yeah, just as it goes, he was. When he made it to level 2, he had to work at a host home, but he had another family that he was staying with who became his kind of adoptee host home parents. So he ran a host home there. He had to take home newcomers, and yes, he was put in charge of newcomers.
And was he restraining them?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if he had to restrain them. He's definitely not very comfortable talking about it. He does feel like he lost a good portion of his life to AARC, and he does talk about how it's been so difficult trying to go on after the program, trying to figure out who he really is and what's real and what isn't. And I know he struggles very much with memories prior to AARC, even things that happened after he was in AARC, and he has to think back. His memories are distorted. He has a hard time remembering facts about things.
Wow.
And, it's been difficult.
Did he earn any?
Very difficult.
Did he earn any? I'm sorry.
I don't know if he had to. I don't know. I don't know if he had to restrain anybody. I don't recall. I think I do remember him talking about restraining somebody at one point, but I don't remember a lot of the details about it.
That's okay. Did you witness any restraint when you were at any of the parent nights or anything like that?
I witnessed. There was one time that was really scary. They were talking about this one kid that was acting out, and he'd gotten into a fight, or he punched the building, and he didn't show up for many meetings after that. And I was really worried about him. I didn't know what would happen to him. And then when he did show up at the meetings, he just sat there looking at the floor. And I was really worried about him. Yeah, he missed several meetings. And I was only in AARC from August until later in September, late September.
Okay.
Like the 24th, I think, was my last day, 24th or so. So I wasn't there for very long.
Right. Did they earn any transferable educational credits, or was there?
No. That's very interesting, because the Calgary Board of Education does have a satellite classroom in the AARC building.
Okay.
And is the alternate, basically an alternate classroom. And all of the youth that are of school age that go into AARC are coded. And I remember having to fill out the paperwork to hand in to the Board of Education. So the AARC program would receive funds for a high school student, but then they would also receive additional funds for someone who was coded, because they had to be coded as basically special needs. To be coded as having addiction would be considered a special need, and the AARC program would receive, or their school at the AARC program would receive additional funds. Now, my son started in August. The school year starts in September. However, he didn't attend any classes whatsoever until late in May.
Wow.
And he graduated in July. So he lost the entire year. And when the next year, when he got out of AARC, he tried to go to high school so he could get credits and graduate, and he was now too old, because he'd missed so many. Since he'd missed practically the entire year that he was in AARC, he wouldn't be able to attend high school long enough to graduate. Like when he did apply at the high school again outside of AARC, he was old enough to still go to high school, but he would have to go for 2 years, and he couldn't be graduating when he's 21 like that. It wouldn't.
Right.
Wouldn't work. Yeah. So to this day, he still hasn't graduated. He hasn't been able to get his high school.
Oh, that's
It really
terrible.
set him back.
Yeah.
It really set him back. But I find it interesting that someone who they don't put him in school because they're too they're too sick, according to them, to go to attend school, but they're not too sick to run a host home and bring oldcomers home or newcomers home under their care.
Right.
So as they're coded, they're deemed a danger to themselves and others, and they're deemed to require constant adult supervision. So they're too sick to go to school. They need constant adult supervision. They're a danger to themselves and others, but the AARC program puts them in charge of other youth in the same situation.
Wow. Did you witness, do you remember seeing the kids? I know you've spoken to a lot of survivors, and the own changes in your son. Did you see a hopelessness, despair? Like, did you see these physical or?
Absolutely. I saw a lot of things. I saw a hopelessness in some of the kids' eyes. I saw almost scheming in the eyes of other kids, where they would attack, a mind game, just attacking each other, even in front of the parents in the open meetings. One youth would be speaking and another youth would be snickering and poking jabs at them and snickering and and then they have to say, love you, whoever, and yeah.
Wow.
It didn't make sense to me. It wasn't what I signed up for. It wasn't what we were expecting, and we certainly didn't see anything go on until we were in the program and they had my kid, and then instantly I knew we weren't getting what we'd signed up for, and I wanted out. And I wanted my son out, but I wasn't able to get him out.
Right.
And that's scary. That's scary that can happen in Canada in this day and age. I still don't understand how it happened.
It's very disturbing.
Disturbing.
Yeah.
It's disturbing. It's affected our life. It's changed me as a person. This has deeply affected my entire life. Things will never be the same.
So tell me about Stop AARC and the Stop AARC campaign. Again, I was just saying.
The CBC, the public news broadcasters in Canada, has a show, The Fifth Estate, and they picked up the story of the AARC program, the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center, and ran an episode on that called Powerless. And when that happened, another person had started the Facebook group called Stop AARC, and it kind of took off from there, and many people have joined and told their stories, and just all the people that want to see an end to this kind of treatment of youth in Alberta. And so it's an ongoing thing. People put information on that group and comment, and there's protests that are organized, and we do protest some of the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center's events, such as their gala, where they raise funds for the program, and their charity golf events that they raise funds for the program. So we protest those, trying to bring awareness to people to at least do some research on the program before they put the kids in there.
Right. And before they give money to it.
I don't want to see this happen and I know it's happening every day with the programs running right now.
Yeah.
And there's kids sitting there suffering. There's kids, I don't want to see some of the kids not know their own middle name when they get out of there.
Right.
I don't want to see another broken-hearted family who loses contact with their kids. And I've talked to people that still are not in contact with their kids. They've lost their kids to the program forever.
Wow.
I've talked to, this was many years ago. This was, 7 going on 8 years ago that we were in AARC. And there were people that fought me back in 2008, 2009, strongly, they're strongly attached to the AARC program and just defending it. And now they're contacting me now. And they've been contacting me. Different people have been contacting me over the last several years, apologizing for fighting me about the AARC program. They once they're away from it, they realized that they didn't know what they were doing. They were just a kid. They weren't qualified to be a counselor.
Right.
They were, disillusioned with the AARC program, brainwashed, if you will, and and they feel quite differently today about their time in AARC and what AARC has done to them. It happens very frequently that people contact me and talk to me about their experiences there.
Yeah, one of the things I always say is I've had surgery, but that doesn't qualify me to be a surgeon, and the same goes for being a counselor or anything like that, where you need professional training and education. You don't learn it experiencing it, and you certainly don't learn it experiencing what goes on at programs like AARC that are basically using coercive thought reform and cult-like methods.
That's right, and it's so surprising to me. I mean, it actually isn't surprising to me anymore, but I hear all the time that they were so strongly attached to the program. You know, they just believed it so much. It just became so much a part of them. And now when they look back, like, they just can't believe it. Like, they don't understand how this has happened to them, and you know, they have nightmares, and they just, you know, it was just so damaging. You know, they don't realize that it's so damaging to them until later, and then they have to sort out their life, and they're raw, and they just don't know who they are anymore, and they're having identity crises, and some people are living a double life where they aren't really in support of the program, but they don't dare admit that to their families, or they'll be cut off from their family, their children, their jobs, and it's terrible. It's horrible. They should not be allowed to do that to people. They shouldn't be able to ruin people's lives that way, especially when these people come to them in crisis, desperately needing help.
Right. I totally agree.
Yeah, and a lot of people, you know, they just don't know. They just can't handle themselves. They can't handle stressful situations, and you know, there's so many people that have graduated AARC that have gone on to commit horrendous crimes, like Andrew Evans, for example, murdered a girl in Vancouver, and you know, I personally, my belief is that he wouldn't have never done that if he hadn't spent those years in AARC.
Right.
I believe that they created that in him, and there's others as well. There's a long list of people that have gone on to commit horrific crimes after their graduation of AARC. Wow. And that is scary, because when they're in AARC, they're supposedly sick, and they're supposedly dangerous, and if they can do these crimes after the program, what's to stop them from hurting people in the host homes or with their contact that they have with the other youth?
Right.
Because it's got to be a stressful situation. Like, you can't say there's no stressful situation during your time in AARC which will trigger your anger or your violence. You know, if they can be angry and violent like that after they've graduated and they're supposedly better, what's to stop them from doing it when they're in the program and sick?
Right.
And the youth in AARC have no way to report abuse because they're so segregated from society. They've got no avenue to report any abuse, and if they speak to staff or parents, they won't be believed or they'll be punished.
Right.
So they've got no way to report anything that happens to them. And if it happens to them when they're a youth in AARC, if they leave, if they're an adult by the time they leave, like my son was, then Children's Services can no longer investigate that. It goes to the Calgary Police Department to investigate. It goes to the Major Crimes Unit. So even if you were a youth when the crime happened, you're no longer a youth when you report it. It can no longer be handled by Children's Services.
Wow.
And we have reported abuse. My son has witnessed abuse in the program, and we've brought it to the police attention, and it hasn't been investigated. The police have said that there's a low chance of conviction, so therefore it won't be pursued.
Wow.
And the police also told me that, I said, well, if this happened in a school, like one instance, a youth was knocked he was hit off of his stool that he was sitting on. He was stood up in front of the group, but he was sitting on a stool, and he didn't want to talk. And he repeatedly didn't want to talk, and he was knocked off the stool onto the floor by the counselor, and this was witnessed by everyone in the program. Well, everyone it was boys group, boys rap. So everyone that was in there at that date and time would have witnessed this. So the police had lots of witnesses. I told the police, if that happened in a school, that teacher would be suspended. There would be an investigation. You can't do that. You can't just come up and hit the student and send them flying to the floor, and it doesn't get investigated. And the police officer told me that they don't have any control over the content of the program. So basically, if part of the program is getting hit off the stool, the police can't do anything about that, and I need to take my query to someone who has control over what they do in the program, the program content. I couldn't believe it.
It's such a double standard. If you witnessed someone abuse their child in a home, the police would investigate immediately, wouldn't they? But this isn't happening in AARC.
Yes, and that's the stance that the Ministry of Children's Services seems to take, because I called them many times, and like my own situation, I would call them. I have no contact with my son, and I would say, this is a problem. I can't see him, and they've got no authority to prevent me. Like, there's no court order or anything saying I can't have contact with my own child, and they wouldn't get involved because they said, well, if you haven't seen him in 6 months, you can't say he's being abused.
Wow.
And they say that the onus is upon the parent. Like, they will get involved if the child is at risk of abuse or neglect in their own home, but they have no control over, like, basically the onus to protect the child is on the parent. When the child is in AARC, the parent has chosen to put them there. They've written consent, and the onus is upon the parent to ensure the child's safety. So if no reports of abuse are coming to Children's Services, they can't do anything about it. And I said, well, I'm reporting it to you now. And they said, well, you can't tell us how he's been abused because you haven't talked to him in 6 months. Well, I mean, at that given time it was 6 months, but I called them many times prior to that. You know, I've called them. I called them at a week. I called them at 2 weeks, a month. You know, I called them repeatedly seeking help, and the police. But it was on deaf ears because they just seemed to fall between the cracks. You can't seem to get any investigation for anything. I don't understand it. You can bring very specific instances of abuse to the organizations, the ministries that are supposed to protect against those things, and for some reason it doesn't get investigated.
Did you also report it to whatever agency licenses AARC, assuming that they're licensed?
Well, it's interesting because the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center doesn't require a license.
Wow.
Because they're registered as a charity, and they say they're just a big, well, when it comes to licensing and things, they'll say they're just a big AA meeting. So AA doesn't require a license.
Oh.
And they say that there is something called the Social Care Facilities Act, which would license places like group homes, foster homes, things like daycare centers and group homes. And but the AARC program says that the host homes that they use are the generosity of parents who are basically just offering their home, that it's not a structured part of the program. However, it is.
Right.
You know, it is, so therefore they should require, as far as I can tell, I've read the Social Care Facilities Act many times, and you would think that they would need to be licensed through them.
Right.
But they somehow managed to fall through the cracks in that legislation.
They exploit all the loopholes they can find to avoid any kind of oversight.
They do seem to, and then they'll you know, the director, Dean Voss, will meet with, you know, he'll meet with the United Way, and he'll have, you know, talks and things as an addiction specialist, and you know, he's got the designation of doctor, so people think that, you know, people just think that, oh, it's an addiction center, he's a doctor, he's obviously a specialist, has to have qualifications and whatnot. But, you know, a lot of attention always comes down to Dean Voss's qualifications, but he doesn't need any because it's just an AA meeting, so he doesn't need to have any qualifications.
Wow.
They're not required to have professional staff work there.
Well, that's interesting, too. You would think that the host homes then would have to be licensed as group homes if that's the way they're housing the kids.
Yes, and the AARC program claims to be outpatient. They are just They're day treatment, outpatient program. They're not a 24-hour residential facility. However, if I have found many instances just online, just through a basic search, where the AARC program does claim to be residential, and they do claim to offer 24-hour care.
Wow.
So I just don't understand why they're not accountable. In one breath they say that they're not, the next breath they say that they are. Whatever will help them at the time is what they'll use.
Right.
There's just no accountability. There's no accountability. It's terrible. The government here in Alberta is doing a huge disservice to the youth in this province and other provinces, because they come in from other provinces around Canada as well, and it's just such a huge disservice. It's neglect. It's gross neglect for the youth here. There's no accountability. They're just above the law. So I really wish something could be done. I've been fighting really hard for the last 7 years to bring accountability for this, and it seems to be futile.
Does Canada have any trade laws regarding false advertising?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know.
That's something I would look into. It was false advertising, and the Federal Trade Commission forced them to change their advertising. I'm just wondering if something like that might help, if there was a similar thing in Canada where there was a trade ministry or something like that.
I'm not really sure, because the AARC program just claims to be a charity. So when their advertising will say things like, I don't know what it says right now, but back when we were involved, it said helping teens into their 20s. So they're helping teens into their 20s, but they're not really claiming to be a business. They're not really claiming to be a medical facility. It's all kind of vague. They keep it vague so that you can't really pin them down on anything. So
Right.
I don't know what they really have for advertising. I mean, now they're on Facebook. They've got a Twitter account. Dean Voss has a lot of videos up on YouTube talking about the things that he supposedly does with the AARC program and the people that he's saved and the miracles and whatnot.
Wow.
There's recent graduates that talk about, how they're happy that they're still alive, and the parents that say they got to their kids just in time, and that would be people like my family. And I mean, I can't really say that they got to us just in time, because my son was in jail for 3 months before he even stepped foot in the building.
Right.
And he hadn't used any drugs or alcohol prior to that and didn't have a problem with it. So not to the extent of being the worst of worst drug-addicted person, that they're going to die if they don't get treatment. Yeah. But then they don't claim to offer. They offer treatment in the form of AA, which is a voluntary program.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to bring up another point too.
Okay.
As far as treatment centers go, to have a youth put into care, well, at the time I do believe it was 5 days, you needed a court order through the PCHAD, the Protection of Children Against Drug and Alcohol Abuse.
Yeah.
So you had to go to court, and you had to get a court order just to hold them in treatment facility for up to 5 days maximum. So how the AARC program skips around that and keep youth there for, if they keep them there for a year of just their own basic treatment, and then maybe they'll stay there for another year as a junior peer counselor, and then go on to stay there another 5 years as staff, that's a long time.
Right.
Even the initial 1 year is a lot longer than 5 days that you need a court order to hold a kid in the program.
Yeah.
So how they skip around that, I don't know. Well, I don't know a lot about. I don't know who licenses them as a charity.
Okay.
I think it would be the province of Alberta.
Okay.
And I've spoken with pretty much every department that I thought could be at least bit applicable. Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Children's Services, all of them. Ministry of Health, everywhere that I thought would be somewhat accountable, that they would be accountable to or would be accountable for them in the protection of people. And there is no accountability in any direction. So you just hit a brick wall everywhere you go. So.
Do you have an ombudsman or anything that would be the equivalent of an attorney general for Alberta?
The ombudsman would not get involved I believe because it wasn't a service, it wasn't like a business, and because it wasn't to do with any government organization. Like, I guess if maybe they were accountable to the Justice Department or something, they would get involved that way. But they just said it wasn't under their, it wasn't something encompassed under the umbrella of what they do.
Okay.
So they could not help either. Well, when we were involved in AARC, they were being funded by ADAC, and I did contact ADAC, and they were funded just at arm's length.
Yeah.
They were funded as at arm's length. So basically it wasn't like an ADAC program. If someone called ADAC, ADAC would send you there. So it wasn't like that. But ADAC did give them money because they applied for some ADAC program funds, and they were granted that, but that's been taken away. They are no longer given that.
Good.
They are also accredited. There's the Canadian Accreditation Council of Human Services did accredit them as a community-based program.
Okay.
And that would be similar other community-based programs. It's the lowest level of accreditation that you can get. They do have accreditation for residential. I don't know the exact name of it, but something to the effect of a youth, like a youth treatment facility.
Okay.
So there is something that you could be accredited as that, which would seem to be more applicable for AARC, but AARC did not meet the qualification for that.
Right.
So they're accredited as the lowest level that the Canadian Accreditation Council will do. So the lowest level. So it's like an after-school Boys and Girls Club. Is another organization that has that accreditation. So, but that is a place that has staff. The kids go there after school. You know, if they skin their knee, they'll get some first aid. They can play they're not in a group of children needing mental and or medical help.
Right.
You know, they're just kids that are going there after school to hang out. So that's the same level of accreditation.
So the accreditation, is that a government agency, the accrediting body, or is that a private accrediting agency?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I would imagine it's probably private, but I don't know that for sure. I know in the U.S. the accrediting agencies are not public. They're privately owned, and a lot of them turn out to be membership organizations, some of which charge up to 10% of your annual revenue on top of their membership fees. It's part of their membership fee package to the programs they accredit. That goes on at some of the accrediting agencies here in the U.S. So I was wondering if there's some financial...
Sure. I think there is a membership fee, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
It's been a long time since I've even looked at that kind of thing. I do know that, you know, if you have that stamp of approval on your website, you're going to look more credible to parents.
Right.
Who are looking for treatment for their youth. So they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, they've been accredited through the Canadian Accreditation Council of Human Services, so that'll make them look more credible.
Right.
And I'm sure that's why they wanted that on there.
Yeah, it does give the appearance of more credibility, but I think if people looked into a lot of these accrediting agencies, they would see that it's a money-making scheme.
I did contact them. I contacted them and I asked them to send me their criteria and what they check for and how it all works and what you need to basically have to even obtain that lowest level.
Yeah.
So when they sent that to me, I found drastic errors in all of it. The AARC program did not even from just what I knew, the AARC program did not meet their criteria. So I also contacted them after that, and they said that when someone is applying for that designation, they will give it to them with the list of criteria, and as long as they know that the program is striving to attain those standards, they will accredit them anyway. And then they will check up on them at a later date to ensure that they have met that criteria. So I found that pretty disturbing that they gave them the accreditation. The AARC program could use their stamp of approval on their website, even though they in no way met that criteria.
Wow. Do you know if they rely on self-reporting, if they're just waiting on like a survey to be filled out by Dean Voss and sent back saying, you know, here's how we're meeting your requirements and here's what we're doing to improve upon whatever areas, which is usually
they would have someone come in from the Canadian Accreditation Council and meet with them and go over the records and whatnot. And it was also like that with the AARC that we're funding them at arm's length. They had to provide certain documents, and there were certain things that they needed to be, that they went in and checked for at the building.
Okay.
So it would be, you know, it would be like a tour. Basically, they would come in and meet with the staff and check for what they're checking for.
Right. What do you know if their checklist? If you don't, it's okay. We can look into it.
Well,
later.
I do have the checklist. I wasn't prepared for that, so I don't have that.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
But I do have it.
Is it mostly, from your recollection, is it mostly building code type stuff? Like, do they have running water? Do they have heat? Do they have?
It was things like if they're taking the youth like out of the city for some recreation event, they needed to have signed consent from the parents. Things like that. They needed to have a certain number of staff that would work with the youth. As far as I know, they could not have like the host homes like they have.
Right.
Because you don't have staff in those host homes ensuring the safety of the youth. So just the fact that they were 24-hour care 7 days a week via the use of the host homes.
Right.
That right there they didn't comply with the standard. And then, you know, there was a whole list they sent me. I think it was 3 or 4 pages of a checklist basically of things they needed to comply with to meet that level of accreditation.
It's amazing how they'll just rubber stamp things like AARC and give them the appearance of credibility when there really is no basis for it at all. Right.
And another problem I saw was when I went and took a critical look at the AARC program's website, and I right along the same sidebar that had that accreditation stamp, it said that the program was supported by the Ministry of Children's Services, and I contacted them, and I think this was on a Thursday or Friday, and by Monday that portion of their website was gone. So the ministry said that in no way do they endorse the AARC program, and that information quickly disappeared off their website. And another thing that was misleading was if you looked under Alberta Health Services at the time, under their list of hospitals, listed the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center. And I found that very scary, because if you're looking at that and you see that they're listed as a hospital,
right,
under something as trustworthy as your Ministry of Health, you wouldn't think that it could be a place that has no license and isn't accredited and doesn't have professional medical staff.
Right.
If you see that under Alberta Health Services website, you would think that they have professional medical staff.
Right.
And I haven't checked lately. That their listing seems to come and go from there. I haven't checked to see if it's there right now, but I'll have to do that later. But yeah, they are not a hospital, and they shouldn't be listed as that under Alberta Health Services.
Definitely. What's your next? Do you know what the next protest is going to be, or when? What do you know about that?
Well, I'm hoping to protest the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Center's gala held at the TELUS Convention Center in May, and then they also have a charity golf event at the Silvertip Golf Resort in Canmore, Alberta in August, I believe. So I'd like to protest both of those. We also protest the AARC program at the Calgary Courthouse on Family Law Day, and that happens in April, so it's coming up soon.
Well, sounds good. We will keep an eye on alerts about that, and hopefully we can get more bodies to those protests.
Yeah, that would be great. I really appreciate all the people that come out and offer their support against the program. So it's great to get out and educate people as to what we've all been through there, and so they can take a critical look at it before they just listen to what the program has to say, because the program claims to help everybody, and they're not regulated by anyone, and since they just use it's a user fee, so they're not covered under Alberta healthcare, so they're not required to have a license, and there's just no accountability out there, and people really need to know that this kind of thing exists, and they need to do the research before they put their kids into any facility that's completely unregulated.
Right. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our experience in AARC, and I hope to see more interviews. Like people in Hackensack, New Jersey, saying don't use it, Alberta, when AARC first came, about how AARC first got established here and how Dean Voss worked for kids of Bergen County and under Miller Newton and things. More than just that, though, like they actually used kids from kids to open AARC back in the late 80s.
And this was kids of New Jersey, so they just moved to Canada?
Kids of Bergen County. Well, there were some Canadian kids down there because there was nothing up here to put them in, so they dragged some Canadian kids down to the U.S. program, and then they took some kids from the U.S. and dragged them back to Canada to open Kids of the Canadian West, but it didn't open. But they actually talk about that on the Fifth Estate.
Okay.
I really should have made reference to Over the GW, too, because my son watched that, and he said it was just so eerie how similar it was to AARC.
Yeah. Right.
Because people who are in AARC will watch that, and like my son, who's pretty critical of movies, he'll watch that. He watched that, and he was just blown away that it was so similar to AARC and that this happened at a U.S. facility.
Right.
Like they had no idea. The kids in AARC, they have no idea that this thing had been going in the U.S. and got shut down, and yeah.
Yeah.
It's as well. Levon said it's as if I was there. He said it's a lot of the things are so much the same, like sitting in the host home car and you can't talk to the other first phasers, and yeah. Oh, I remember one of our little talks there got shut down because when I was mentioning the talks where you sit in a circle and everybody talks about their drug experience or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of them got shut down because I mentioned the date. I mentioned something like, oh, well, this happened on September 13th or something, and then it was shut down and I was led away. I said, what? They said, well, you mentioned the date and you can't do that.
Oh.
Interesting. Okay, so the kids aren't allowed to know what day it is. Yeah. Well, actually, I think my son said the date, and I corrected him. That's right. Because he said, oh, well, I can't believe I've been here for this long because today's the, 18th or something. And I said, no, it's only the 13th. And then it got shut down.
Wow.
So the conversation got shut down.
So do you know if were they allowed clocks or calendars? They didn't have.
Oh, no.
No, nothing like that.
No, not at all. Not until later phases.
Wow.
Well, they would have to know what time. You asked me a question about whether my son had to work, and I don't think I really addressed that. I don't think I addressed that. He did. He had to. He helped work on Dean Voss's house, and I don't think he was compensated for it. And he did have to get a job, which he did. He got a job through AARC Parents, and he was paid. And most of the kids in AARC had to open a bank account that was joint with a host home parent, so that they didn't have access to their own money. And I remember he was supposed to hand over his bank card, but there was a whole bunch of things going on, and it got missed. So he had access to his own money when he was in there. Like he was supposed to sign because I wasn't in it. So he had host home parents that weren't his parents. So it somehow was an oversight. And they weren't added to his bank account, and he had his own money. And he also got in trouble because he quit his job and got another job, but he said they couldn't really say anything because it was a better job to fit around what he was doing at AARC, and it paid more money, and it was something they would have approved of, so they couldn't really say too much. So he got away with a lot there that other kids wouldn't have gotten away with. And I didn't even touch upon he had to refer to Dean Voss as his dad.
Ew.
And he had to refer to Dean Voss's son as his brother.
Weird.
He was the golden child, I guess. Andy Evans was the golden child before, but Andy Evans ended up in jail. And so my son was the next golden child. He got a lot of gifts that would be given to staff, like the house coats with the AARC emblem on it, and very expensive coats and watches and things with the AARC logo on it that would have only been given to staff. And he wasn't yet staff. I should have touched more on the abuse too, because I got a call from the ex-spouse of one of the counselors there, and there were children brought to their home because they were too beaten to bring to the host home.
Wow.
Like, I didn't touch on the abuse there at all as much as I should have. I spoke with his ex-wife. They were in the middle of going to court, and they had a daughter who was being brought into the AARC program, and she was only young. She was 3 or 4 years old, and she didn't want her daughter exposed to everything that happens at AARC. And so this was in court, and it was a custody battle between her and one of the counselors there.
Wow.
And this little girl was given gifts by Dean Voss and stuff, and she wasn't very happy about that. And she told me about the youth who were brought to staff homes because they were in too bad of shape to go to. They were concerned that the host home parents would report it.
Yeah.
Which isn't likely to happen because the host home parents are responsible. They're responsible for anything that happens in their host home, not like a group home. You know, it's their personal home. So if someone's abused there, they're ultimately responsible. They're the ones who allowed kids to be locked up in the bedrooms in their own home.
Wow.
So if anything were to happen, they would be very unlikely to report it because it would come back on them. No, it wouldn't come back on AARC.
Right.
And I also witnessed a lot of emotional abuse there. Stories that were brought up by Dean Voss about the youth, because parents can't see their kids in the wraps and whatnot, so that they were talked about. And I felt very sorry for some of the parents whose their kids' experiences were just put out there, and all the other parents and all the other youth could hear this, and it's a lot of very private things that really shouldn't have been, mentioned publicly for everyone to hear. Stories of kids cutting themselves and ending up in the psych ward. They were brought into the psych ward for non-compliance, not because they were mentally ill.
Right.
And that was one thing that was threatened, is that if you didn't comply, you could end up in the mental hospital, because it would just take Dean Voss's signature and another doctor's signature, and then you'd end up in the mental hospital. So I thought that was just wrong. Like, you don't put someone in the hospital for non-compliance. You put them in because they're mentally ill.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just so much mental abuse there. Aside from the physical abuse, the mental abuse was unbelievable.
They use humiliation tactics.
Yes, for sure. And even down to things like you couldn't have your own religious beliefs. You had to attend Christmas at AARC, so if you were Jewish, say, and you didn't celebrate Christmas, it didn't matter. You still had to attend and celebrate the way they celebrate.
Wow.
There was just a lot of mental and emotional abuse and physical abuse.
Terrible.
I would just say, if you love your child, don't put them in AARC. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous, unregulated, unaccountable program. The youth are inventory. They're not there to help people. Youth are inventory in AARC.
Right.
There are AARC supporters within the court system, and with the drug court, they are offering treatment as opposed to jail time. So that's not safe to do if the program isn't held accountable, or like if the justice system is not held accountable for the program.
Yeah. Then
people shouldn't end up in there through the courts.
Exactly. I'm wondering if there's a kickback scheme with the one judge, like in your situation. Even if it didn't go directly to her, if her husband, who's on the board, got some kind of financial incentive for her recommendations.
Yeah, well, and even if he didn't, then he's still earning his livelihood through there, because he's treating youth that are in AARC, and so he would be paid through Alberta Healthcare that way. So he is at least somewhat earning an income from there. It's definitely a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And it's definitely bias. So.
That's
and I don't even know the full extent of it.
Right.
I have talked to other people that had AARC added as a condition of their released, just as what happened to my son. I have talked to lots of other parents that were able to pull their kids out. Having parental consent is a requirement of the program. According to their own requirements, if you withdraw parental consent, he shouldn't have been able to stay.
Right.
So to me, that makes no sense, and I don't understand why I wasn't able to pull my son out. So I know that that can happen, and it's a scary place to be. I really wouldn't want anyone else to be in that spot. Well, my consent was required for him to be there in August.
Okay.
And in September, I withdrew my consent only after a few weeks, and I couldn't take him out.
Wow.
And also he didn't have much of a say either, because the AARC program gave them one of their own lawyers, an AARC-friendly lawyer, who I contacted, and because he was just a minor, and I was concerned also that this very expensive lawyer, that his fees would be my responsibility.
Right.
Because my son was a minor, and he was not very forthright with how he became my son's lawyer. He just said that all he would really tell me was that he was advised to represent him.
Advised by who?
He wouldn't tell me.
Wow.
He would not tell me. This lawyer's name was Mark Tyndale, and like I say, he's now a drug court judge, and he wouldn't disclose.
Wow.
No. Yeah. So whereas my son's other lawyer was in support of him speaking with his family, this new lawyer that the AARC program gave him the AARC gave him was not in support of him having contact with his family.
Wow.
Which my son had every right to speak to his family, and his family had right to speak to him, and it's there's laws under the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and those were broken.
Right.
Those were broken by AARC. They were broken by the judge. They were broken by the lawyers involved. Well, AARC seems to use the same, break the client down and build them back up model that was used at Straight and Seed and Synanon.
Yeah.
And kids before AARC, kids of Bergen County. Yeah, they seem to use the same behavior modification tactics of with removing the youth from all their familiar environment and they put them in such an isolated, rigid environment, and they only allow them to view materials that are provided by the program.
Right.
And it's very disorienting, and it just rips them out of their reality.
Yeah.
It's psychologically damaging. I've seen it. I've experienced it, and I've seen it in my own family, and I've seen it in countless others, how psychologically damaging that is. And they shouldn't just be able to do that with a charity license.
Right.
They shouldn't be able to do it at all, but, that's a psychological treatment that they're using on people, and they shouldn't be allowed to do it.
Definitely.
Yeah. I consider it torture.
We do, too. We consider it torture as well. I think it's hard to argue that it's not torture when you're dealing with isolation and restraint and abuse and humiliation. I think when we look at extreme examples like Abu Ghraib, what happened in that Iraqi prison, we see that same thing. They're using humiliation tactics and dehumanizing the people that...
And sleep deprivation.
Yeah, sleep deprivation.
And what I noticed, too, is that there was a lot of, the group think, there was the whole group think, and it's us against them, and the group love bombing.
Yeah.
I noticed that, I suddenly had all of these parents hugging me, and I wasn't really a touchy-feely kind of person, and I just didn't really want all these strangers that I don't know holding my hand and hugging me out of nowhere and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cultic. And they also told they told me when I was in AARC, is that not to use your mechanic, not to use the services that you normally use, and find people within the program to keep the money in the program.
Wow.
They actually tell you that. They use that as a specific example, don't use your own mechanic now. Find someone within AARC who can provide mechanical services, and so your money will go to them, and their money will go to somebody else in the program.
Wow.
Yeah. That was another one of the disturbing things. Yeah. Oh, and you were asking about work as well, but the parents had to work there. The parents did all the gardening, the parents did all the cleaning, and it was interesting. I was just speaking with somebody else about this cleaning thing because I had to come in and clean on Parent Day, and that's what I was doing at the time, was cleaning. And we weren't allowed to use any cleaning product, which I thought was odd because they had, in the storage room, they had jars of Comet, which is a cleaning product, but we weren't allowed to use it because they said that Comet will trigger the kids. It will, because if they were using any kind of powder substance, it would trigger them for their drug addiction.
Oh my
which
goodness.
was really odd because, but the kids weren't there when the parents were cleaning. The kids were in the host homes. It was Saturday. They were doing what they were doing. So, and then I talked to someone who was a client in the program at the same time that I was there, and when they have their cleaning day, they use the Comet.
Wow.
So it seemed odd that they wouldn't let the parents use it because it would trigger the kids, but they let the kids themselves use it.
That is weird.
Yeah, we had to just use bottles of diluted vinegar to clean everything.
Oh, wow.
Because they wouldn't let us use the actual cleaning products. So many odd, crazy things. And then graduation, when there was graduations and any kind of group get-together kind of celebration, the parents had to provide all the food, and they had to clean up, and you were expected to solicit organizations in the community, like solicit Safeway for turkeys and to have at the dinners, and you had to try to, solicit gifts or money or whatever. So you had to also solicit for the AARC as well.
Wow, that just sounds exactly like a cult.
Yeah, it is. In my opinion, it is a cult. From what I know of cults, it certainly fits the category.
Well, I would say
the description of a cult.
Yeah, speaking to Marilyn, it was just so bizarre that Andrew, his first instinct is when he has hurt someone is to call Dean Voss, and Dean Voss tells him to come back to the facility instead of directing him to do what he's, if not legally, socially responsible to do, which is to call emergency services.
Yes, and I noted that was actually one of the reasons I wanted out of there, because I was in ARC when that happened. We just started because Andy killed Nicole that August, and we started ARC August 17th, I believe it was, and it was a little later, that it was a couple of weeks or a week or so later that he killed Nicole. And I remember going into group that day at ARC, and we were given a little a photocopy of a newspaper clipping, and it showed her face, and it seemed to me odd, like it didn't seem like a real newspaper clipping.
Yeah.
It was a little description and then her photo, and it didn't seem to make sense because it had just happened. And it didn't seem to make sense to me that his parents were there and that they were talking about it like this, and it had just happened.
Wow.
Yeah. And they used it. They used it as a tool against the parents. Dean Voss would say to me, "That's your kid. Andy Evans is your kid. This is where this disease will take you. That's your kid. Your kid will do this. Your kid will hurt you. This is what drugs and alcohol will do to your kid."
Wow.
And I was thinking, that's not my kid. My kid didn't do that. That's their kid. Yeah, it has nothing to do with me. We didn't do that.
Right.
So, yeah, they certainly used that as an example.
But if ARC's treatment is so good and Andy had been part of the program for so long, how could this have possibly happened if they're so successful and effective? Exactly.
And I found it very, very disturbing and criminal that Dean Voss advised Andy to come back to Calgary. And, maybe I wasn't there. Maybe even if Dean Voss had told Andy, "Well, turn yourself into the police." And if Andy said, "No, I can't do that. I'm gonna flee." And then Dean Voss says, "We'll come back to Calgary." Well, if Andy wasn't willing to turn himself into the police, then Dean Voss at the very least had the moral responsibility to phone the police himself.
Right.
And tell them where Andy was. Because he put all of the women in danger between Vancouver and Calgary by telling him to come to Calgary.
Right.
He could have, he's already killed one person. He could have killed another 10 more 100 people on his way back to Calgary.
Right.
And I believe that they had to find a way around. I don't think Andy was intoxicated when he killed Nicole. I think he was stone cold sober, and what would that would just make him a monster.
Right.
Not a person who was acting under the drugs of alcohol, under the influence of drugs and alcohol.
Well, it'd be interesting
and I
if
can't
he went
think of any other reason why they would do that, because by the time he got to Calgary to get a toxicology report, they would have no way to prove that he was intoxicated or not that night.
Right.
So I think that that's the only reason he told him to come to Calgary. I don't think Andy was under any influence.
Yeah.
There's no proof of the fact.
Do you think that the way the program is, it could make an unstable person believe that any person who is at a bar is somehow trying to tempt them into the subhuman category of a druggie that they use at AARC?
He thought that somehow it would lead to his death if he drank at all.
Wow. Right.
And he'd really come to believe that, and that's what AARC was telling him.
Wow.
Was that, this would lead to your death, like it's all or nothing, like you're in or you're out.
That's what's so scary with cults and cult environments like AARC is people can be so convinced and almost feel like that if they don't agree with the program, that their life is in danger. If they don't, they become institutionalized in some senses, and they don't feel safe or comfortable outside of that environment, and everything seems a potential threat. Right. Because
right.
It's very much like, I don't know, I've known people involved in religious cults too, where you don't talk to people outside of the cult, you don't do anything, you don't question their teachings, you don't object to maltreatment.
Right, and it's definitely that way in AARC. It's definitely that way. And when I was no longer there, I had a contact list of all the parents, and I started calling some of them, and they flat out told me they're not allowed to talk to me.
Wow.
I'm not, and I would ask, I said, why? And they said, because you're not in the program.
Wow.
I'm not allowed to talk to you. And I did call this one mother one time, and she was happy because her son made it to second phase, and he was now having a host home, and he was and I asked her if he was in school, and she didn't know.
Wow.
So her son is now at a point where he's living back in his own home, and she didn't know if he was going to school or not. And that's how far removed the parents are. And, as far as children's services go, you can't say that those parents are providing safety for their children, because the AARC program removes the parents' ability to protect their own kids.
Right.
They don't even know if they're in school or not. The kids are now living in their own house, and they don't even know if they're in school or not.
Wow.
There's still that distance between them.
That's terrible.
Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and other family members, you can't have any contact with your family members who aren't in the program when you're in there. If anyone lives in your house, like if you rent out a room to a roommate, that person has to also be in the program.
Wow.
And that was posing a problem for me, because I always rent out rooms in my home. I'm a single mom.
Yeah.
And I always rented out rooms so we could afford to live in a better place. And I could not see being, trying to put someone through that.
Right.
How could I ask someone who's renting a room for $500 to go to the AARC program and be a part of that?
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And I was pretty opposed to locking the door to one of the bedrooms from the outside and putting bars on the windows and holding youth hostage in there, and they tell you that not to listen to them. They actually tell you if you hear screams coming from the bedroom, ignore it.
Wow.
Because they're just trying to manipulate you. They tell you that. They said that the newcomers are the old comers' responsibility, and the parents don't get involved.
Wow.
The parents only look after the newcomer if the old comer's in the shower.
Well, it sounds like a fire hazard for sure.
And it was, and there was a couple of investigations through the Calgary Fire Department. I called them, and they started a couple of investigations. And the AARC program said that historically, the old comers didn't have a key to the window to get out in case of a fire, but that they do now. However, all the current clients, they were unable to interview the current clients because of confidentiality.
Oh.
And the AARC program admitted that the former clients didn't have keys, and that formerly, yes, it was a fire hazard, but currently it was not a fire hazard.
Wow, but there's no proof that they've changed their ways.
No, because it would be considered a breach of confidentiality to question any of the current clients.
Wow.
There went the investigation.
Well, if they're not licensed as a health facility, they help.
And that's exactly actually what they told me too. They said basically these parents own their home. So what happens in their home is their responsibility. And if they want to put bars in the windows, they can. And really, they're kings of their own castle, and we can't do anything about a sleepover at Johnny's house. That's exactly what they said.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. However, there is a host home package. If you look on the Stop AARC page on Facebook under the documents, you can find the host home package.
Yeah.
And it states everything that the parents need to do and comply with and whatnot with the running of a host home, which is obviously an integral part of the program. So it's not just a sleepover at Johnny's house.
Right.
It's part of the program, a critical part of the program. What AARC is doing, and in the sense of how they run a group home or not.
Right.
Yeah, and situations like that, I would have been referred back to the Social Care Facilities Act, because they are the ones who regulate, the people that regulate that act and whatnot. The ones who enforce that act and those legislations.
Right.
So I was, it was just pass the buck from one department to another, one ministry to another.
That's infuriating. We get the same here, so I understand.
Yeah. The trouble with AARC is that they're not required to do anything. If they had a license, it could be pulled.
Right.
If Dean Voss was an actual medical doctor, he could be held up for malpractice.
Right.
You see, things like that, if their group homes were licensed, then the licenses could be pulled, or they could be held accountable. But, when the people who regulate these things, they say, well, that's I can't just, I'm a Social Care Facility Act. I can't just come to your home and make you comply with our legislation because you're a private dwelling. You're a private residence. You're not a group home, right?
Right.
If you were a group home, then we could hold you accountable. So that's how they just fall through all the cracks that way. They're not required to have any of these things.
Wow.
Yeah, I got quite a bit of inside information when I was there, but I wasn't there all that long. I probably would have stayed there longer if I could have gotten around that issue with my youngest son.
Yeah.
But who could do that? I didn't have any family he could stay with.
Plus being autistic, even being uprooted at all, even to a familiar environment, might cause setbacks in other areas with autism.
There were problems. There were definite problems. There's documented definite problems from the school. And I even phoned Children's Services and said, because they suggested that I basically put him up for adoption.
That's
I think he was 13 at the time. And Children's Services said, look, we're not a dumping ground for children that can't participate in another program. Tell them to go pound sand. You shouldn't have to give up your child because he can't attend this as a sibling.
Right.
And I said, well, that's what they're telling me to do. They're telling me to boot him out onto the street, put him up for adoption if I have to, or put him into temporary custody of Children's Services. And they said, look, if we found your home to be detrimental, your home, not the AARC program, if we found your home or you to be an unfit parent or your home to be detrimental, then we could take a look at it. But I'm sorry, that's just not the situation. And the situation is he's fine in your home. and there's nothing we can do about that. And I said, well, I would have never surrendered him to you, but just so you know, that's what they're telling me to do.
Right.
And or to just kick him out onto the street, which I just can't do that. So what do? You have to choose between your kids, or he could have entered AARC as a client.
Wow.
And that would have killed him. Like, he wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
So that was another reason, and then at that point I was brokenhearted because I felt like I was sacrificing one kid for the other. What do you do?
It's
really
terrible.
What do you do? Yeah. But thanks, Angela. I'll let you go.
Okay. Have a good night. Thank you.